My parents chose my sister over me, but I was the one who inherited everything. They always said she was the golden child, but when the will was read, the truth shattered their world, and rebuilt mine. Growing up, I always knew my sister Lucia was the favorite. She was the one with perfect grades, perfect hair, and that effortless charm my parents adored. I was the quiet one. The creative daughter who preferred sketching in her room instead of attending dinner parties. Mom called it a phase. Dad said I lacked ambition. Every compliment they gave Lucia felt like a reminder of everything I wasn't. When I got a scholarship for graphic design, they congratulated me, then immediately asked if I had considered switching to something serious, like law or finance. Lucia didn't even need a scholarship, my parents paid for her private university. She got her master's degree in business, while I learned to survive on freelance jobs and ramen noodles. Years later, when our grandfather passed away, the whole family gathered for the reading of his will. My parents were somber but oddly expectant. Grandpa had been wealthy, old money kind of wealthy, and everyone assumed the inheritance would follow the same pattern it always had, to those who looked the part. I sat quietly at the back of the lawyer's office, doodling in my notebook, pretending not to notice Lucia's smug little smile. But then the lawyer read the words that would change everything. I, Ernesto Delgado, leave my entire estate, including Hotel Miramar, to my granddaughter, Carmen. The silence that followed was deafening. My mother gasped, my father blinked in disbelief, and Lucia's smile froze mid-expression. I remember feeling every heartbeat echo in my ears. I wasn't even sure I'd heard correctly. The entire estate? To me? The lawyer continued reading, explaining how Grandpa believed I had the heart and integrity to preserve his legacy. My parents exchanged glances, and Lucia's nails dug into her designer purse. For the first time in my life, I wasn't invisible, but the way they stared at me made me wish I still was. When we left the office, no one spoke to me. Not a word. Just cold, stunned silence. I got into my car and sat there for a long time, staring at my trembling hands. I hadn't expected anything. I didn't even know Grandpa thought of me that way. But that day, I realized, he'd seen something in me the rest of them never did. And that was just the beginning. The first weeks after the will reading were strange. My parents barely spoke to me, except for short, polite texts, "Hope you're well," or "Don't forget Sunday lunch." Lucia, of course, didn't message at all. She'd blocked me on every social media platform the same day Grandpa's lawyer called her to confirm the details. It would have hurt, if I hadn't grown up used to her coldness. Still, inheriting Hotel Miramar felt surreal. It wasn't just a hotel, it was an institution. A cliffside resort overlooking the turquoise sea, known for its palm-lined gardens and marble terraces. I remembered visiting as a kid, running through the hallways while Grandpa chuckled from the lobby. It always smelled like salt, jasmine, and polished wood. Now, it was mine. The first thing I did after signing the transfer papers was meet the staff. Miguel, the manager, greeted me in his office, a tall man with gray hair and kind eyes. "Your grandfather spoke of you often, Miss Carmen," he said with a soft smile. "He believed you'd take care of this place better than anyone." I swallowed hard. "I'll try my best." Over the next few months, I worked tirelessly, walking through every department, talking to employees, learning the routines. I replaced outdated systems, fixed broken air conditioners, and made sure everyone was paid fairly. Slowly, the hotel began to reflect something new, not just luxury, but warmth. And for a while, I was happy. Genuinely happy. Until my mother called one afternoon. Her tone was suddenly sweet, almost unfamiliar. "Carmen, darling, we've decided to hold this year's family reunion at the Miramar. You don't mind, do you?" I froze. The family reunion, their annual weekend of champagne and comparison. The event where Lucia always arrived in a new dress, flaunting promotions and vacations, while I was the afterthought. Now, they wanted to hold it in my hotel. I should have said no. I should have made up an excuse, said the rooms were booked, or that renovations were ongoing. But something inside me, something that had been quietly waiting for years, wanted them to come. Of course, Mom, I said calmly. I'll make sure everything is perfect. When I hung up, I caught my reflection in the window, the sea glittering behind me, my face calm but my eyes burning. Perfect, I thought. Let's see how perfect they think I am now. The reunion weekend arrived faster than I expected. By Friday afternoon, the Miramar's lobby gleamed under the soft glow of its chandeliers. I had approved every detail myself, the floral arrangements, the seafood menu, the welcome cocktails with gold flakes, everything designed to whisper elegance without screaming money. As the first guests arrived, I stood at the top of the staircase, watching. My parents entered arm in arm, both dressed impeccably. Dad's eyes swept across the marble floors and glass walls with a mix of nostalgia and pride, but not for me. Your grandfather really built something remarkable, he said to Miguel, who greeted them at the desk. Yes, sir, Miguel replied politely, glancing at me for a fraction of a second. And now Miss Carmen is continuing his legacy beautifully. My father's face stiffened. Ah, yes. Very good. Then came Lucia. Of course she made an entrance, white dress, diamond earrings, the kind of grace that made everyone pause mid-conversation. Carmen, she exclaimed with mock warmth, walking over to kiss my cheek. You look so different. I almost didn't recognize you. I smiled tightly. I could say the same. She looked around the lobby, her gaze scanning the staff, the guests, the gold plaque engraved with Hotel Miramar. Then she leaned closer and whispered, I didn't realize they let employees dress this fancy now. Classic Lucia. During check-in, I noticed how Mom and Dad accepted the presidential suite without hesitation. Lucia and her husband Roberto got the ocean view suite, naturally. My cousins received deluxe rooms. And me? Mom looked at the list, then handed me a key card with a perfectly rehearsed smile. Room 108, dear. Next to the laundry. Simple, but cozy, just your style. Miguel's eyebrows twitched, but I nodded. That'll be fine. They didn't know, of course. None of them did. As far as they were concerned, I was just a guest at the Miramar. We'd agreed, Miguel and I, to keep my ownership private until I was ready. Later that evening, at dinner, I sat half-hidden behind a marble column while Lucia took center stage. She told stories about her new luxury car, her husband's brilliant investments, her life abroad. My parents hung on every word. When the waiter came to take my order, I asked for a salad. Dad smirked. Still on that diet of yours, Carmen? We can pay if you want something proper. The salad's fine, I said softly. The waiter, Antonio, my head chef, bowed respectfully. As always, Miss Carmen, we'll make it just the way you like. Lucia's fork froze midair. You know the chef. We've crossed paths, I said lightly. No one said another word. But I saw it, the flicker of confusion behind their smug expressions. For the first time that evening, I allowed myself a small smile. They were in my world now. The night grew louder as wine bottles emptied and laughter echoed across the dining hall. My family was in their element, bragging, comparing, pretending everything was perfect. I sat quietly, swirling my glass of water, invisible as always. But this time, the invisibility was a shield. Miguel approached me discreetly. Miss Carmen, he said softly. There's an issue with one of the guests. May I speak to you in private? Roberto chuckled from across the table. What could possibly be urgent for our Carmen? Did they run out of crayons in the gift shop? Laughter followed. I smiled politely and excused myself, In Miguel's office, the soundproof door closed behind me. He looked uneasy. "I'm sorry, miss. I don't like seeing them treat you this way. It isn't right." "It's fine," I said, though my voice trembled slightly. "I need to see who they are, when they don't know who I am." He nodded. "Your grandfather always said you had patience, but I never realized how much." I laughed softly. Neither did I. When I returned to the restaurant, dessert had arrived, tiramisu and champagne. Lucia was mid-anecdote, her voice carrying effortlessly across the table. "You wouldn't believe how cheap the hotels are in Italy," she said. "Not like here, this place is lovely, but definitely outdated. Imagine if someone with real taste renovated it." My fork froze. "What do you mean outdated?" I asked evenly. Lucia looked surprised that I'd spoken. "Oh, you know, Carmen. It's pretty, but old-fashioned. The furniture, the art, it's all so, well, provincial. If it were mine, I'd modernize everything." I took a slow sip of water. "Interesting," I murmured. "You think so?" "Of course. Grandpa's style was elegant for his time, but it's been, 30 years? It's sad he never sold this place when he could have made a fortune." My mother nodded. "Your grandfather was sentimental. He never understood business like Lucia does." I looked at each of them in turn. "Yes," I said finally. "He saw things differently." The silence that followed was sharp, almost metallic. They didn't notice the double meaning, or maybe they did, and simply ignored it. That night, long after everyone had gone to bed, I stood in the empty lobby with Miguel. The chandeliers were off, and the only sound was the ocean beyond the glass doors. "He'd be proud of you," Miguel said quietly. I looked at the portrait of my grandfather on the far wall, his kind eyes, his familiar smile. "He's the only one who ever was," I whispered. But even as I said it, a thought took root in my mind. They were under my roof now. They thought they were here for a vacation. They had no idea what was coming. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the palm trees and painted golden lines across the lobby floor. Breakfast was already in full swing, the buffet arranged like a magazine spread, tropical fruits, smoked salmon, imported cheeses, and pastries baked at dawn. I arrived early, but my family was already there, seated at the best table in the terrace section overlooking the sea. "Carmen, over here," my mother called, waving half-heartedly. I joined them, trying to ignore the glances from Lucia and Roberto. "Fruit and yogurt again?" my mother asked, frowning at my plate. "That's why you look so pale. You should eat real food, dear." "I'm fine, Mom," I replied. "I just like starting light." Roberto snorted. "Or maybe you're saving money. You always were the practical one." My father laughed under his breath. "That's what she calls it." Their laughter mixed with the clinking of silverware. I smiled politely, the same trained smile I'd used my entire life. Then I noticed something, the way Miguel and the other staff subtly acknowledged me. A respectful nod here, a soft, "Good morning, miss," there. My family was too absorbed in their own conversations to notice, but it filled me with a quiet, delicious satisfaction. After breakfast, I joined the tour of the hotel that Lucia had insisted on. "It'll be fun," she'd said, though her tone suggested she wanted to critique, not appreciate. She walked through the hallways as if inspecting real estate, running her manicured fingers along the walls. "Imagine repainting this in ivory," she said to Roberto. "And replacing the carpets with marble. This could actually look expensive." I said nothing. When we reached the rooftop pool, Lucia gasped dramatically. "Now this," she said, posing against the horizon for her phone camera, "is the only thing worth keeping. I'll post it and tag the location, maybe it'll finally get some attention." "Careful," I said lightly. "It's a very exclusive spot." "Oh, please," she replied, rolling her eyes. "If I were running this hotel, everyone would know its name." I smiled slowly. "Don't worry," I said. "They will." That evening, as the family gathered for dinner again, conversation turned, inevitably, to Grandpa's inheritance. "It still surprises me," my mother said, stirring her wine, "that he sold the hotel before he passed. Such a sentimental man. I wonder what he did with the money." "He didn't sell it," my father corrected her. "The lawyer said he transferred ownership to a private buyer months before his death. Some investor group, I suppose." Lucia sighed wistfully. "If only it were still ours. We could have done something amazing with it." I took a sip of water, hiding my smile behind the glass. "Oh, you already are," I murmured. And in that moment, I realized something important: this wasn't revenge anymore. It was revelation. They had never truly seen me. But they were about to. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in my small, guest room, the one beside the laundry, listening to the hum of the hotel's machines through the wall. The irony wasn't lost on me. I owned the entire building, yet my parents had placed me in the noisiest corner as if to remind me of my supposed place in the family. The moonlight streamed through the curtains, casting silver lines across the floor. My phone buzzed. A message from Miguel. "Miss Carmen, I thought you'd want to know, your sister requested a private meeting with me tomorrow morning. She mentioned investment opportunities." I smiled. Of course she did. Lucia always had a nose for money, especially when it wasn't hers. The next day, I watched from the mezzanine as Lucia strolled into Miguel's office wearing her most professional smile. She had a folder in her hand and that persuasive tone she used whenever she wanted something. I couldn't hear their words, but I knew the pattern. She would flatter him, hint at connections, and then offer to help in exchange for a share of control. 30 minutes later, she left the office looking irritated. When she spotted me in the hallway, she forced a smile. "Didn't know you were up so early," she said. "I own a small business," I replied smoothly. "Early starts are normal." Her eyes narrowed. "Still working on those little design projects?" "Something like that." She shrugged and walked away. But I could feel the tension in her shoulders. Whatever Miguel had told her, it hadn't gone her way. Later that afternoon, during the beach luncheon, she struck again, this time publicly. "Mom, Dad," she said, loud enough for the whole table to hear. "I've been thinking. We should invest in something together. Maybe buy a property, start a boutique hotel. I know a manager here who might help." I glanced at Miguel, who stood by the buffet with a barely concealed smirk. My father leaned forward. "A hotel, you say?" Lucia nodded, feigning nonchalance. "Yes. This place inspired me. Imagine a modern version, better service, better design." I set my fork down gently. "Sounds ambitious," I said. "But maybe you should focus on what's already in front of you before trying to replace it." Lucia tilted her head. "What do you mean?" I smiled faintly. "Just that some things aren't as available as they seem." Her expression faltered for the briefest moment before she looked away, pretending to laugh. My parents didn't notice, they never did. That evening, I walked the beach alone. The tide was low, and the sea breeze carried the faint scent of salt and night jasmine. Grandpa had believed in me when no one else did. And standing there, toes sinking into the cool sand, I made a promise, not of revenge, but of truth. Tomorrow, I'd stop pretending. Tomorrow, they'd finally know whose name was written on the deed they'd been bragging about all weekend. Morning sunlight flooded the dining terrace, glittering over the sea like shards of glass. My family sat at their usual table, mid-brunch, the perfect scene of privilege. Croissants, mimosas, laughter. I walked toward them with calm steps, feeling every heartbeat echo in my chest. Lucia was scrolling through her phone. "I'm thinking of leaving a review," she said casually. 4 stars. "Service is great, but the decor could use a younger touch." My mother laughed. "Be gentle, dear. I'm sure the staff are doing their best." I stopped beside the table. "Actually," I said, setting my cup down, "you might want to hold off on that review." 4 pairs of eyes turned toward me. "Why?" Dad asked, half amused. "Because the staff here might take it personally." Lucia raised an eyebrow. "And why would they care what I think?" "Because," I said, keeping my voice steady, "they answer to me." Silence. Only the clinking of cutlery and the whisper of waves. My father frowned. "What are you talking about?" I looked directly at him. "Hotel Miramar. The deed, the title, the business accounts, they're all in my name. Grandpa left everything to me." For a long, breathtaking second, no one moved. Then my mother laughed, short and disbelieving. "Don't be ridiculous. He sold the hotel years ago." I shook my head. "No. He transferred it privately, to me. I've been running it for months." Miguel approached at that moment, holding a silver tray. "Miss Carmen," he said formally, "shall I have the staff prepare the conference room for the Delgado family meeting you requested?" I nodded. "Yes, thank you, Miguel." Lucia's mouth opened, then closed. My father's expression turned pale, the color draining from his face. "You mean to tell us," he said slowly, "that you own this place?" "That's right." My mother's voice trembled. "But why would your grandfather do that?" I took a deep breath. "Because he saw me. He saw what none of you ever did. You called me unambitious, simple, a disappointment, but I was the only one who ever listened to him. I learned from him. I respected his work." Lucia stood abruptly. "This is absurd. You're not capable of running a hotel." I smiled faintly. "And yet, here we are, with record bookings and international awards for hospitality." Her jaw clenched. For years, I had imagined this moment, what I'd say, how they'd react, but the reality felt heavier, quieter. I didn't feel triumphant. Just free. "I don't want your apologies," I said softly. "I just wanted you to know who I became without you." Then I turned and walked away, leaving them speechless beneath the golden morning light. I didn't look back as I walked through the terrace doors and into the cool lobby. My legs felt like glass, fragile but steady enough to keep me moving. The moment I'd waited for my entire life had finally come, and yet, it didn't taste like victory, it tasted like release. Behind me, I could hear muffled voices. My mother's panicked whispers, my father's low disbelief, Lucia's sharp, breaking tone. The sound of their world shifting. I didn't hate them, I just didn't belong to their version of love anymore. Miguel was waiting near the reception desk, a knowing calm in his eyes. "Are you all right, Miss Carmen?" I exhaled. "I think so. Maybe for the first time." He nodded approvingly. "Your grandfather would have been proud. He used to say, truth doesn't always need to roar, sometimes it just stands tall." I smiled at that. "Then I suppose it's time to stand tall." We spent the afternoon in quiet activity. I joined the staff for lunch in the service area, the same floor my parents had deemed too noisy for me. They laughed and shared stories, and for the first time, I felt like I was part of something genuine. Not because of money or bloodline, but because of respect. Later, while I reviewed some renovation plans in my office, I heard cautious footsteps at the door. It was my mother. Her elegant composure was cracked, her voice softer than I'd ever heard. "Carmen," she began, we didn't know. Your grandfather never told us." "That was the point," I replied gently. Her eyes shimmered with something between guilt and realization. "You've grown into someone I barely recognize." "I had to," I said quietly. There wasn't space for who I was before. She hesitated at the doorway, her hand trembling slightly. "Your sister is upset. She says it isn't fair." I let out a faint, humorless laugh. For once, fairness is finally on my side. My mother nodded slowly and turned to leave. "Your grandfather always did have strange ideas about justice." When she was gone, I stood by the window, watching the sunset spill gold over the sea. For years, I'd chased approval that never existed. But standing there, surrounded by the legacy of the only person who truly believed in me, I realized I didn't need to be chosen anymore. I had chosen myself. And that was everything they could never take. Dinner that night was quieter than usual. No laughter, no clinking glasses, no bragging. The golden glow of the chandeliers reflected off a table where no one seemed to know what to say. I joined them anyway, not to gloat, but because it was time to close the distance that had poisoned us for years. Lucia didn't meet my eyes. Her perfect posture was gone, her napkin twisted nervously in her lap. My father stared at his plate, jaw tight, the picture of a man realizing he'd lost control of a story he thought he owned. My mother, for once, seemed smaller, not fragile, but human. I sat down, folded my hands on the table, and broke the silence. "You don't need to stay for the rest of the weekend," I said calmly. "If this place makes you uncomfortable, I'll have cars ready in the morning." My father's eyes flashed. "So that's it? You humiliate your own family and send us away?" I shook my head. "No. I'm giving you an out. What happened today wasn't humiliation. It was truth." Lucia finally looked up, her voice sharp but shaky. "You think this makes you better than us?" "No," I said softly. "Just different." She let out a bitter laugh. "You always played the victim, Carmen. Poor little you, misunderstood by the world. Maybe Grandpa just pitied you." I felt the sting, but I didn't flinch. "Maybe," I said. "Or maybe he saw through what pity looks like, the same way I finally do." Lucia pushed back her chair, tears glinting in her eyes, and walked out of the restaurant without another word. My mother started to follow her but stopped midway, turning back to me. "You remind me of him," she whispered. "The way you speak, the way you hold yourself." Ernesto was stubborn too. It used to frustrate me, now I think I understand. I managed a small smile. "Then maybe there's hope for us yet." For a moment, her hand reached across the table, hesitant, trembling, and rested over mine. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was something close. A bridge. After dinner, I walked outside to the terrace. The night air was soft, the sea humming gently in the distance. Miguel joined me with 2 cups of coffee. "You handled that with grace," he said quietly. "I wasn't trying to win," I answered. "Just to end the game." The waves rolled against the rocks below, steady and timeless. For the first time in years, I felt peace, the kind that doesn't need witnesses or applause. Tomorrow they'd leave, and the Miramar would remain, not as revenge, but as proof that being unseen never meant I was unworthy. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise. The sea was still dark, the horizon painted with the faintest trace of light. I walked barefoot through the quiet corridors of the Miramar, the air filled with that peaceful hum only old buildings carry, a sound of memory, of stories that linger even after the people are gone. When I reached the lobby, the night staff were finishing their shifts. They greeted me with genuine smiles. "Morning, Miss Carmen," one of them said softly. And for a moment, I saw my grandfather's reflection in every polished surface, his quiet pride, his faith in me. By the time my family came down with their luggage, I was already seated in the lounge with a cup of coffee. No tension this time. Just silence and the scent of salt in the air. Lucia looked tired, her eyes rimmed with sleepless anger. My parents approached cautiously. "We'll be leaving early," my father said stiffly. "We appreciate the hospitality." "You're always welcome here," I replied. "Truly." He hesitated, as if searching for something to say, but words failed him. My mother leaned forward and kissed my cheek, tentative, unsure. "Take care of yourself, Carmen. And of this place. It suits you." "Thank you, Mom." Lucia stayed behind for a moment. I could tell she wanted to say something, anything, maybe an apology, maybe another insult. Instead, she whispered, "You always wanted attention. Well, now you have it." I smiled softly. "No, Lucia. What I wanted was respect. Attention fades. Respect lasts." She looked at me for a heartbeat longer, then turned and walked away. The sound of her heels echoed across the marble until the lobby doors closed behind her. When the cars pulled away, I stepped outside, letting the wind hit my face. The sky had turned gold and pink, and the first rays of sunlight reflected off the ocean like melted glass. For years, I thought being left out of my family's love meant I was worth less. But I finally understood, I hadn't been the forgotten one. I'd just been growing somewhere they refused to look. Grandpa's words came back to me, "When people don't see your light, it's because they're blinded by their own reflection." I looked up at the hotel, its white facade glowing in the dawn, and whispered, "Thank you, Grandpa. For everything." The Miramar stood tall above the sea, my inheritance, my freedom, and my quiet triumph. Not the revenge of the overlooked. Just the peace of the one who finally stopped waiting to be seen.